Hello, welcome to our worship facility webinar, Camera Best Practices for Live and Streaming with Ethan Manuel. I'm Gene Last, editor of Worship Facility.
Hey guys, what's going on? My name is Ethan Manuel, and I am the broadcast production director for Christ Fellowship Miami, and I am so excited to talk to you guys about how we do camera best practices and some tips and tricks for live and streaming environments. Let's get started. So first thing that I've learned in live and streaming environments is getting lighting right. Now, the funny thing about that phrase is um, I believe I still don't have lighting right, and I'm constantly learning and constantly being updated either by my tech director or just um, worldly sources. I have people that are videographers that are really good at what they do, and I'm always picking their brain to see how it works and to see how I can get better, and always learning new things. Here at CF, we do a 3-point lighting. That's basically key fill and backlight. So what that I have a little example or illustration here for you. So what that basically means, it's the key light is basically the key and the fill are the lights that are in the front lighting the subject, but they're basically off to the sides. They're not direct. We use our key light at the highest percentage, so I would say we do our key light with, getting a little technical here, with MK Spot. That's a fixture. We run that at around either between 85% or 90%. And this all depends on skin tone, skin color. We're a super diverse church, so we have to adjust to make sure everyone looks balanced. That way no one is blown out, no one is too dark. So that's the only light that does adjust in color. So we run that one variably between the lowest I've gone is probably 80%, but the highest I've gone is 95%. That's our key light. Our fill light, which is on the other side of the worship center, that light is ran at 50%. That one, we throw that at the subject, and we also add a CTO to that light. So it's ran at 30%, but it's also with a CTO, and that's to basically create a beautiful tone on their face, but it's also to eliminate any shadows that you will see because we're not lighting head on. It's all lighting from the side. So we run the fill light at 30%. That does not change. The only thing that will change will probably be position if our software decides to not play nice and we have to readjust. And then the third one is the backlight. Now the backlight is, to me, it's a backlight. It's basically up above in the roof, and it's lighting down. And we run that one. It's from a separate fixture. We run that at about 40%. That does not change. That temperature, that intensity does not change at all. The only thing that does change is the color. For the color of the backlight, since I use that heavily in worship and I use it in teaching, but for the color of the backlight, I usually stay away from any cold colors. So if it's a blue that we're going with in our color scheme for a song, I will probably lean towards the secondary color. So if we're doing blue with teal or blue with cream for Raise a Hallelujah, which is a song, I will lean towards the cream because I don't want it to be too dark or too cool for the camera. But that's also just preference. That's how I like to do it. I like to keep my backlight at a nice temperature that's making basically the worship leader or the subject glow nice. So one important thing that I also just want to really emphasize is once I get all my lighting right, while that is happening, I think it's very important, and this is something that I do all the time. I never look at the subject while I'm adjusting lighting, because if it looks good to my eyes, I'm not sure how it's going to be interpreted on the camera. So I always use a camera when I'm adjusting the key light, or the how the backlight looks on the subject. Um, if I'm feeling that I have a lot more time on my hands, I'll usually use a spectrogram, which basically it tells you the signal. That basically it's almost like the loudness of the waveforms coming over the camera, so you can actually see if the red, green, or blue, or which one of those are going to be higher, or maybe just the brightness. It's basically just telling you how bright the subject is, and you're viewing it on a graph. I'm gonna put a little example here for what a spectrogram is. So here you can actually see there's a difference going from this subject to this subject, and basically I want, so if I'm running if we're running 3 worship leaders for the weekend, I want them all to be at the same level on the spectrogram across the board for all of my cameras, and that's the best way that I get my lighting right. Now that's just front lighting. I also have band wash. So for my worship band, we do something a little different. With that, I'm basically it kind of varies based on how I want the song to be programmed, but the main wash, I just do a wash for the band. And the main wash that I use for the band it's basically, if you guys know about any kind of fixtures, they're R2X Chauves. And I basically have them right underneath the projector screen, and they're facing the band. So they're there to kind of silhouette the band, but they're also projecting light from the back onto the instruments. And then on the bottom, I have, so if we're talking about keys, so keys and electric are on one side, and drums and bass are on the other side. So on the keys and electric side, which is mirrored to the other side, I have one big batten behind those guys. I'd probably say there's about a 4-foot gap between the keys player and the electric guitar. So that one batten backlights from the bottom up both musicians, and it's the same for the opposite side. Now the thing with this band wash is, one thing that I have ran into in the past is, and it always happens to me during service. We'll be going through service after like this is Sunday morning. We'll be going through run through or service, and I'm like, man, I really feel like these lights are blowing out my instruments, and also just these subjects, just the musicians. So one thing, or it's either blowing out or it's underlighting them. It's not projecting enough light onto them, so they're very dark. Because we don't have any front light going towards the band wash. It's all just backwash. So one thing that's helped me here is whenever I program lights, I've started to, I basically took a piece of styrofoam from a big lighting fixture box. I took that out, that was protecting the lighting fixture. I take that out, I take the styrofoam out, and I put it where the keys player sits. So it's pretty big. I'd probably say it's about the size of my torso. I'm not a big person. And once I have that set up, I'll set up one of my stage cameras in an area where I know my stage camera is going to be. Generally, they're moving all the time. They don't stop moving. But in an area where I know it's going to look good for me to gauge for both areas, for electric and keys. And once I have that set up, I program lights like that. And I'm not looking at the subject. I'm looking at my multi-view, and I'm adjusting my color, based off of how it looks on the styrofoam, or I'm bringing down the intensity, or I'm bringing it up. Now the advantage that I have with the lighting fixtures that we have is I can turn off certain parts of the light and go from there, and make it look good. I still do run into issues where if I'm using if I'm using a magenta or a blue, those colors do generally blow out cinematic cameras. So I will turn off parts of the light, and that's how it helps me. Or I just won't use that color. I'll use the secondary color, or one of the colors that's not being used in those lights. So that's backlight and bottom light for band wash. We do have a third way of lighting our band members, but it kind of varies sometimes depending on the song and how much energy I want to create. If I feel like I'm not getting enough wash from the back and from the bottom, I'll use one of my fixtures that are above, and I'll basically just top down light them. Now they're still moving fixtures. They still have color that needs to be adjusted there, and here it becomes kind of a game of how does it look on cameras. So if I feel like I'm not projecting enough light from the back and it's not bright enough, then I'm gonna use. I say I'm gonna sacrifice one of my top lights, either for that song or for the whole first set or second set, and I just gauge it from there. So for best practices, I'm going to dive a little bit more into cameras now. Just operating end. We use the rule of thirds for framing. Rule of thirds, if you think about it, it's basically if you have your viewfinder, you want to split your screen into three areas. So left side, middle, and right side. And mainly this is used, it could be used for both teaching and worship, mainly worship. The reason why this is so important is because for worship, we don't place our subjects in the center. We keep them on the side thirds. So we keep them either on the left third or on the right third. And the way that this helps is if I have my camera one, which is a static shot, but it's also it's moving, and I'll explain more later. If I have my camera one capturing worship leader from the front on the left third, and then I have my stage cam, which is camera 3, for example, he has the drummer side, or sorry, cam 4, which is on the drum side. He's gonna place the drummer on the right third, and this is basically gonna allow for us to go from someone being on the left, and then once we cut to the next camera, they're going to be on the right. So you're not going to have an overlap. At times, yeah, they do go in the center. That's okay. Well, I mean, no one's perfect, but this allows for a more seamless transition going from one camera to the next. The way that I've made my camera operators more aware for framing and how to frame or set up for the next framing shot is, for example, if my camera 4 is on stage and camera 1 is hot, it's okay for my camera operator that's on stage, who's next up in the shot list, to look at the projector screen and see what side that person is putting the subject on. So if he sees camera 1 is framing up on the left third, he's going to frame the drummer up on the right third. And it's a quick little glance and back to doing what he's doing, and then we roll from there. And that's basically the framing that we use. It's rule of thirds, and we've used it maybe once in teaching when we had to do a conversation. We had chairs out, and it was basically an interview style where pastor had to interview someone, and we basically put the pastor obviously on the right third, and we put the other people on the left third, and then two of our other cameras had head-on shots with both subjects, or close up on one subject, close up on the other subject in the middle third. But mainly for our teaching, if the pastor is just teaching and walking left to right like it's a regular Sunday, he's in the middle. He's not going to be on the sides, because then it's just going to be weird in my opinion. So that was framing. Now we're gonna cover something that has been one of my favorite things to teach and just see implemented. This is called Cinema Verite. Cinema Verite is basically it describes a style of filming. It's basically like simulating documentary style feel, so that it feels more real on the camera or from the screen. This has helped us because just to give you a breakdown of the cameras that we run 6 cameras for worship. So when we have camera one is on a tripod, and it's basically in the center, all the way in the back by the FOH booth. It's probably about 30 feet, probably about 30 feet away from the stage. And then we have camera two. Camera two is on a dolly that's about 10 to 15 feet in front of camera one, and it's bouncing from left to right. Camera two does not do any type of cinema verite. Then we have camera 3 and camera 4. Both of those are on stage. Those are on stage, and they are on easy rigs, both of them. Then we have camera 5. Camera 5 is in the, I guess you could say, in the crowd, and that is basically shooting with the intention of shooting through the congregation or people in the crowd, and getting worship leaders only, no band unless we need them in an emergency. And then camera 6 is basically on the right side. So camera 5 is on the left side in the crowd. Camera 6 is on the right side. 5 and 6 are also on easy rigs. And so here, camera 1, and then 3, 4, 5, and 6, they're all doing cinema verite. And what that basically means is you're basically, if you had a circle, you're basically taking something in the center of that circle, and you're kind of just swiping the edges of that circle, and you're going in like a figure 8, but the more you get into it, you kind of realize that it's actually really it's not really a figure 8. So for example, we're going to do the circle again. Say I have a circle, and in the middle of the circle, there's a circle with the rubber band, and you're kind of just swiping the edges and making a random movement, nice and smooth, to simulate that you're kind of bouncing around. Now, you're going to notice that as you get into this, there's going to be preference. You're going to be like, okay, that's a little bit too drastic. Let's smooth it. Let's either slow it down or make that circle smaller to make it more realistic. And that is how you perfect cinema verite. This has been huge for our camera 1, because since that camera is on a tripod, it's able to simulate a movement that makes it one of the stage cams. For example, before we were doing cinema verite and shooting in cinematic or shooting in 24, it was the old school pan left, pan right, drop down, tilt up, push in, pull out method, and that's old school, and it doesn't really work, in my opinion, in my preference. I prefer the cinema verite and just the way we do things now, because running in 24, there's a huge difference that the cinema verite basically brings to that dynamic. And even for our stage cams, if they're playing with the rack focus and they're going to go from the worship leader and then rack focus into the keys, they're not actually holding it steady. They're actually going to be doing a slight rocking movement as they're doing it, but making it smooth. You want to make it nice and tasteful so that it looks good and it doesn't look like you're out of breath. So yeah, that's cinema verite. The next thing we're going to talk about is negative space and looking room. For negative space, this is it's pretty straightforward. You want to always make sure that if you're using the rule of thirds, that you're not cutting off the head, or you're not, showing a part of the keys section where it's basically all this room of just the background and then a little bit of keys. But then on top of it, like if you're running lower third lyrics, those hands and those keys are being covered by the lyrics. So you want to always make sure that the negative space is equal to each side of the rule of third. And so like to fix that, you'd basically just bring your keys or your shot up a little bit more to the center to help with that. Another way would basically be is if you're with the worship leader, or sorry, if you're on a tripod and you have the worship leader and any of your side thirds, that there's not a lot of headroom above that person. It's pretty straightforward. I'm pretty sure you know about this. Just making sure that negative space is equal. The next one is going to be looking room. This is my favorite. This is something that we learned and we were able to, perfect as well. So I'm going to give you a quick example. Say we have a shot of the worship leader from one of our camera fives. Oh, sorry, from one of our cameras that's in the crowd, and usually it's going to be a side profile shot of that worship leader. So if we'll take this iPhone box as an example, if this is the viewfinder and the worship leader is basically right here and she's looking that way, she's looking that way, you want to make sure, or at least you just want to make it look more pretty, and give her some looking room. So if the person is here but their eyes are facing that way, it kind of looks like they're looking into a wall. Like there's no looking room. What we've done, or what you can do, is you can bring that worship leader over to the left side third and expose all of the area that's happening in front of her, giving her that looking room and making it a better shot, in my opinion. And this has been very helpful for us because I'll just say that it has gotten to the point where it just makes everything more seamless. It helps with framing. So your camera operators know it's going to be right third, left third, but then also like you're not putting anyone in a position where they're kind of looking at a wall. It just looks a lot more seamless that way. So this next one is actually pretty cool. It's basically called Stay Takeable. This talks more to your camera operators, and this is very important because it plays an important role in your camera operators, but also in your camera directors. For the camera directors, it's going to give your camera director the ability to run through multiple shots without making any adjustments to any of the camera shots. It also gives more ownership towards your camera operators, and it instills a lot more trust to your camera director for the camera operators. So staying takeable, what does that mean? Basically, if you're a camera operator, you want to set up a 3-shot sequence and repeat that 3-shot sequence until you're done with it. This is going to help you stay takeable. So for an example, if you're my camera 3, you have a lot of shots you can do, right? So we're going to go over a quick basic shot. If you're camera 3, you're basically at keys and electric, and you also have the worship leaders back in your view. So a 3-shot sequence would basically be, okay, I'm going to go from the guy strumming the electric guitar nice and tight. We're going to walk over to the keys, and then we're going to swing around and we're going to show the worship leaders from the back. While you're doing that, you're keeping the 3 important things that we learned previously in the back of your mind. Framing, side thirds, never in the center. Cinema verite, a little bit. And your looking room and negative space. So that 3-shot sequence from the electric guitars to the keys, swing around, and now you're showing the worship leaders. That's a 3-shot sequence. If you repeat that 3-shot sequence, eventually you're going to get to the point where you're making your own. Now you're making a 4-shot sequence, or now you're making a 2-shot sequence, but it consists of rack focusing from the worship leader into the keys. And you're building upon that. You're shuffling those things and you're staying takeable. What this does is it basically allows the camera director to go to multiple shots at any time because everything is just, for a lack of words, everything is just going amazing. Think about it like this: if just one camera is doing that, how do you think the camera director will feel if all 6 or however many cameras you have, all of them are doing that sequencing? Obviously, this also comes into being prepared and knowing what songs, and also making sure that your team has the chemistry together. But yeah, so for this next one, it kind of ties into staying takeable. It's don't stop moving. So if you are running through your shot sequence and you are constantly feeding your camera director or producer more shots, the way that you want to just keep that rolling for the cinematic feel is to not stop moving. When you do stop moving, it needs to be a slow little rock back and forth, making it nice and tasteful. And this does go for the people that are mobile on mobile cameras. Also, while you are moving, in order to not take heavy steps, I want you to bend your knees for more control and for more stability. That way, while you're walking around, you're not going to kill your back, and you're also not going to make any subtle jarring movements that are going to kind of, reflect back onto the shot. And next up, and honestly, last but not least, this goes for everyone in the camera world. This is a huge thing for streaming and for live environments. Is coming prepared. At Christ Fellowship here in Miami, we use Planning Center. This has been huge for our teams because not only do we know who we're serving with, but we also know the exact flow and arrangements of songs that we're doing. We are generally doing mashups, or we're doing different arrangements of songs. So staying updated to what songs we're doing, and also listening to how songs, perform, or how songs sound, what feel they're giving, is very important. I'll give you a quick example. One of the cool songs that I'll just give you an example. So in Glorious Day, it's a huge electric guitar line. If my camera 3 knows that is happening, and that's a big part of the song, he's not going to be on the keys or looking at the worship leaders. He's going to be focused on the guy hitting the electric lead line for the song. That's one pretty big example of knowing that. Second big example is also just knowing the speed of the song. So knowing how fast you need to walk, knowing how fast the dolly needs to move, knowing how fast you need to cinema verite, or vice versa. Well, that's all I have for you guys. Thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to share with you the knowledge that I've learned over the years with live broadcast and just streaming environments. I hope you guys enjoy the rest of your webinar. Have a great day.
Thanks, Ethan. It was great to hear some best practices from someone actively working in a church. If you have questions for Ethan or for me, you can send them to me at glass@worshipfacility.com, and we'll give you some answers. Thanks again to Ethan Manuel of Christ Fellowship in Miami, and thank you for watching our webinar.